Tonight, President Trump will deliver the State of the Union address in the House chamber. It was supposed to happen last week, you may recall, but it was delayed because of the government shutdown.
Tonight's address comes just 10 days before the deadline for another possible shutdown. But White House aides say, unlike most of the president's recent remarks, this speech will have a theme of unity. To look ahead, we're joined by Democratic strategist Antjuan Seawright and CBS News contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez. Leslie, the White House aides say the president will attempt to create this theme of unity. I feel like we arrive at this point. I don't know why the press does this when the White House makes a comment like that, because you inevitably hear pundits and talking heads saying, you know, is this when he steps up and becomes presidential? And it hasn't happened in 2 years. Are we expecting anything different this time?
No, I think he did do that in the last State of the Union. A lot of people will say that was his high point in terms of looking that executive management, executive presidential role. The difference is, and the disconnect is, we keep expecting that every day from this president, but we see consistently in everything from the way he spends his time to the way he makes decisions is unorthodox. It's not something that Washington is familiar with. So to see something that is familiar, Vlad, that's what people are excited about. The question is, how will this new Democratic Congress respond? Are they going to really kind of thumb their nose at many of his ideas? I think you'll hear the roar on the left on some things that they have agree with, but more so, let's hope we don't hear the boos, and maybe some from the right. No, I'm kidding. I wouldn't never expect that.
You never know.
Not
Romney's
openly.
There now.
Not openly.
Yeah.
Not openly. We're much more reserved in the way they disagree with people. But there's definitely frustration on the right as well.
So you don't think you'll hear a "you lie" from the Democrats?
I know.
Wow, you don't know. I think in this environment where it's so polarized, it would be just so disruptive to everything that both the new Congress is trying to do and certainly with the president's agenda.
I would just think Nancy Pelosi, if you recall that moment when that happened during President Obama's State of the Union address, the look on Nancy Pelosi's face, she was standing behind the president at the time. I would think that she would have her party in check, in control over a situation like that.
Yeah, she's a boss. I mean, look, it's her house. The president will be going to her house. I always couch the State of the Union this way. This is the pregame, and these are the plays you plan to draw up. But what happens after you leave on the execution side will be how most people will judge this president. He has a tremendous opportunity to highlight his successes in a bipartisan way, like criminal justice reform, like things that he and Democrats agree on, prescription drugs. However, this president is so unpredictable, as my friend here has laid out so many times, so we just do not know what to expect from him. I think this is probably uncomfort zone for him, because of the Democratic Congress, because this looming issue called immigration is still there. We're so close to perhaps a second government shutdown in just a matter of weeks. And we also do not know what's going to happen in a few weeks with a big debt ceiling debate. And so I think there's a lot of pressure on this president to deliver in a tone that I think that not only his base will say yes to, but also that the American people will say, you know what, let's trust this president to get us out of this mess.
What's really interesting about that is if you compare it even historically, you look at the first term of Bill Clinton, and it's always that first 2-year period that they're so sophomoric. There's a lot of rookie mistakes, so to speak, until they get good management, executive management of the White House, which tends to be a chief of staff that comes in. Because we have so much fluidity, this is still a president who's walking across ice. There's not a lot of stability in how he gets from one place to the other. And I think that's the disadvantage and the handicap. But overall, the president is learning and adapting to how he is working with this new Congress. So his style and approach tonight are going to be very important.
Leslie, would you advise the president, if you were helping him write this script, to use this as an opportunity to reinforce his argument that we need to spend billions of dollars on a border wall? Or should he just stay away from it right now?
He has to double down on that. And the reason I say that is many of us believe, especially when you talk to his baseline supporters, that this is, and we've said this before, that George H.W. had the famous line, "Read my lips, no new taxes," and he raised taxes. That's what people remember. People draw a parallel with the president on build a wall, whether he does it or not. This is really how they're measuring his success. Forget the Supreme Court justices. Yes, we're glad we have those, but you promised you would do this. So it makes the campaign of 2020 a lot more difficult for the base to accept. He has to show he's a lion roaring to get this done.
It seems to me that's quite a tightrope walk then to preach unity when we all remember that the reason that we had the longest government shutdown so far, partial government shutdown in history, is because of the division over the money, not over a wall, not over a fence, not over security, over the money that he was demanding.
And he makes the point to Margaret Brennan that Nancy Pelosi must like human trafficking. That kind of language.
It's pretty divisive.
His tone tonight and the substance of his immigration approach will be very key, I think, to how negotiations will go in the next several days. If he goes hardline in a speech written by Stephen King, who's a hardline on immigration.
Stephen Miller.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Stephen King would be a really good thriller. That would be gripping.
Yeah,
you know, would. I would listen
both
to
of the
that.
Stevens are problematic.
Yeah, we're plenty terrified.
Problematic in my world. But if he goes hardline on the immigration approach, I think that's going to really box in his colleagues in the House and the Senate who want to keep the government open, who want to come to a bipartisan agreement, because I think all of us agree immigration should be a bipartisan issue. But if he comes in a tone, he talks about in broad strokes border security, the need to secure our border, but we can do it in ways where Democrats and Republicans agree. I think that gives him some power going into the negotiation room, and it gives his base in the Congress some comfort for them to lay in when they go into the negotiation room. And I think that's so important. And that would be the most telling thing about this speech.
You know, what seems nonsensical about the whole thing and it is that the Democrats have agreed to border enforcement before, at least this type of secure fencing. And now everybody has selective amnesia, which we do in Washington. And the truth is that the balance is in the middle, but we both fundamentally agree, the right and the left, on where that is. That there should be enforcement on these compromised ports of entry, mostly in urban areas, you know, where you have the bridge traffic, but that technology should be part of that, and that the president is looking with that olive branch to look at something about legalization on the undocumented, particularly DACA students.
And you don't need $5 billion to do it, or maybe not.
Wherever those dollars fall, Nancy Pelosi just dug in her heels in this respect of not to give him any of, I'm going to give $1, and that's ridiculous, because the truth is that both, whether you're Republican or Democrat, you believe in securing the border, just the means by which, as long as there's agreement now, we're not talking about inch by inch. There's a lot of agreement there, and that's where I believe, I'm on the positive side, I believe something can be done.
Here's the problem, Leslie, where I think Democrats felt the rub. The president campaigned, you heard the cry, build that wall, on Mexico paying for this wall. Democrats gave him border security money for a wall, $1.6 billion in the continuing resolution. Less than 10% of that was spent. And now he's back for $5 billion. And what experts have said, according to some of my sources in the Congress, is that while it's $5 billion today, there's going to be maintenance on the wall. There's going to be environmental things. Like that's just one down payment on what could be a very long-term spending project. And that's what the president, that's what most people feel like the president has not been honest about. So it's $5 billion today, but it could be $10 billion next budget cycle, and that's where the rub is. And then I think we all agree on border security, but what does that look like? You can't put a concrete wall, slabs or whatever, places where you have water. That doesn't make sense. You have intimate domain. There's so many things that buy into this argument of wall, and I think that's where the disagreement is. And hopefully his tone tonight will speak very broadly, so we can get to a place of dealing with comprehensive immigration reform.
So the president and the first lady have 13 guests for tonight's speech. I mentioned one of them at the top of the show, which is a child whose last name is Trump, who's apparently been bullied, Leslie. I know that Melania Trump has made bullying a big part of her platform. The president has bullied. This is just impartial. The president bullies, and he's upfront about that. He knows that it works with the people that he's either bullying or the people who support him in bullying those individuals. In addition to the guests, have you seen any kind of legitimate work done on the Be Best campaign? In other words, when First Lady Laura Bush made reading an essential part of her platform, she was out in schools and libraries promoting libraries. Obviously, with Michelle Obama, the food was a big issue for her. Right. These guests that are coming, are they all tied around this bullying and Be Best campaign?
I believe they are, but it's a much smaller footprint, I would say. This is not in comparison to Nancy Reagan, like just saying
right,
no.
That just say no.
That had ramifications for a generation.
Right.
And, and when that campaign stopped, there was actually an increase in drug use among younger children. So these campaigns have tremendous impact, but you have to marshal resources across the aisle, nonprofits, and even globally, and that's a really difficult thing to do, especially early in administration. So I give the First Lady, a pass in the sense that she has the good intention. It's a very difficult thing to put all that together. But again, it's almost looking at it through a very narrow lens, that your last name is Trump and you're being bullied. I mean, the irony is rich in this one. It's about that idea that we can be more inclusive. That's one of the criticisms I have about the White House. If you look at a lot of the people that they keep moving through those doors doors. They're the same people that have been moving through since the president was elected. There's not a lot of new energy in that ecosystem and new people that are willing to listen to what either First Lady or the president want to say. And until they open those doors up, so to speak, they're going to have the same challenges internally as they do with Congress.
Who are the Democrats bringing?
There's a variety of guests. We were talking offline about the congressman from California who's bringing, I think, a survivor from the school shooting in Florida. I think that speaks to his politics and where he wants to go. You'll have people who will bring undocumented immigrants. You'll have people who will bring disabilities and special needs. I think it varies from people's political progress and what they want to do eventually. At the end of the day, I think that's all noise, because what really matters is what all of them do when they leave the building. You can bring an undocumented immigrant, but if you don't fight hard for positions that reflect that when you leave, it really doesn't matter. And while it's cute and it gives you cool points on the surface, I've never gotten caught up in who the guests are, except when the Obamas brought a friend of mine from Greenwood, South Carolina, who started the chant "Fired Up and Ready to Go." I was excited about that.
That's very good. The producers are going to absolutely kill me right now because they keep telling us to wrap, but I feel like we have to talk about the official Democratic rebuttal and non-official rebuttal.
That's right.
Who are they? What's going on?
Stacey Abrams will give the official Democratic rebuttal. You will have the independent senator from Vermont give his own version of a rebuttal. I'm not saying it's the Democrats' rebuttal. And I said this earlier, at the end of the day, our party is headed more in the direction of the Stacey Abrams, how it looks, our approach, and where we need to be. And I think Bernie Sanders is very frustrating as a Democrat, and I think he's out of touch, particularly if he wants to be president and he wants the nomination. When the African-American vote is how you get to the nomination, I think he's probably going to make some African-American women mad along the way.
All right. Antjuan Seawright and Leslie Sanchez, love having you guys. Thank you very much for stopping by. Our special primetime coverage of the President's State of the Union address begins tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern.